The alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m., tearing Sarah Collins from a dream about her mother. In the dream, they'd been walking through Pike Place Market together, her mother pointing out the flower stalls, laughing about something Sarah couldn't quite remember. Then, the alarm, and the dream dissolved into darkness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah lay still, listening to Grace's soft snoring from the bedroom. She slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, had for 2 years now, since Grace's dementia made it unsafe for her grandmother to be alone at night. By 5:15 a.m., Sarah was checking on Grace before her shift. Her grandmother's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Where's the girl who lives here? Sarah's heart clenched. It's me, Popo. It's Sarah. Sarah? Grace's face scrunched up, trying to place the name. Then something shifted, a moment of terrible clarity. Oh, I'm so sorry, child. The morning shift at Seattle Public Library's Capitol Hill branch was usually quiet. Carmen Rodriguez was waiting with 2 coffees and a knowing smile. So, did they call? Sarah couldn't help but smile. Carmen had been her best friend for 3 years, bonded over shared poverty and dreams of something better. Not yet. They said they'd call this week about... Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Sarah Collins? The voice was professional, female, slightly bored. Yes, this is Sarah. This is Jennifer from the Seattle Art Museum. We received your application for the curator position. Are you available for an interview today at 3 p.m.? Sarah's heart stopped. Yes, absolutely. I'll be there. After hanging up, Carmen grabbed her shoulders. You got it? Today, 3 p.m. The curator position paid $65,000 a year, with benefits, health insurance that would cover Grace's medications, enough money to afford better care, maybe even move to a 2-bedroom apartment. Enough to finally stop drowning. The morning passed in a blur. At 11:45 a.m., Sarah practically ran out the door, Carmen calling after her, "You've got this!" She burst through the apartment door at 12:15 p.m. and immediately smelled something burning. Popo? Sarah stood in the kitchen staring at the stove where a pot had boiled dry, smoke rising from blackened rice. The burner glowed red. Grace held a wooden spoon, tears streaming down her face. I was making lunch for my granddaughter, but I forgot how. I forgot. Sarah rushed forward, turning off the burner, moving the pot to the sink. It's okay, it's okay. I'm a burden. Grace's voice broke. I'm a burden to that poor girl who takes care of me. You're not a burden. I'm Sarah. I'm your granddaughter. Grace looked at her, really looked, and Sarah saw the moment recognition flickered and died. Her grandmother didn't know her. The front door opened. Linda Wong, their elderly neighbor, bustled in carrying soup. She took in the scene instantly. I told you I'd bring lunch. You no need to cook. Between them, they got Grace settled. Linda waved Sarah toward the bedroom. You have important thing today, yes? The museum job. How did you? She hear you practicing in bathroom. You go. I stay with Grace. In the bathroom, Sarah changed into her interview outfit. A navy blazer from Goodwill, a cream blouse Carmen had lent her, and her mother's pearl earrings. She stared at her reflection. A 28-year-old librarian with a community college education and an online master's degree. Someone who'd given up her scholarship to University of Washington when her parents got sick, who'd been caring for her grandmother while working double shifts. Someone who was one emergency away from losing everything. Sarah pulled out the medical bills. $2,847 from last month's ER visit. $1,200 for medications. Rent due in 5 days, $1,400. The curator's salary would change everything. Linda caught her arm. "You good girl, Sarah. Your mother, she watchin', she proud." The bus to downtown Seattle left at 2:15 p.m. Sarah boarded with 45 minutes to spare, clutching her portfolio. Through the window, she watched Capitol Hill fade into the city skyline, allowing herself to imagine a different future. One where she wasn't constantly calculating which bill to pay late, where Grace could afford quality care, where Sarah could finally use her education for something meaningful. Sarah had no idea that in less than an hour, she would face a choice that would shatter that dream completely. But in ways she couldn't imagine, it would lead to something far bigger. First, she had to miss her interview. Pike Place Market at 2:47 p.m. was everything Sarah loved about Seattle. The afternoon crowd flowed through the covered arcades, tourists photographing the flying fish, office workers grabbing lunch, street musicians filling the air with music, the smell of fresh flowers mixed with salt water from Elliott Bay. Sarah walked slowly through the main arcade, using the familiar sights to calm her nerves. She'd come here as a child with her mother, back when her parents still ran their restaurant and weekends meant exploring the city together. That was before the restaurant failed, before cancer took her mother 3 years ago, leaving Sarah with Grace and medical debt. Sarah checked her phone. 2:47 p.m., 13 minutes until her interview. The Seattle Art Museum was a 10-minute walk. She cut through the arcade, heading toward First Avenue. That's when she saw her. An elderly woman sat alone on a wooden bench near the fish stalls, completely motionless. She was impeccably dressed, wool coat, designer handbag, silk scarf. But something was wrong. The woman's face had gone pale, almost gray. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands gripped the bench with white-knuckled intensity, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. People walked past, dozens of them. A businessman glanced over and kept walking. Tourists stepped around her to photograph the vendors. A teenager with headphones didn't even look up. The woman tried to stand, swayed dangerously, and collapsed back onto the bench. Her hand clutched at her chest. Sarah looked at her phone. 2:48 p.m. 12 minutes. The woman's eyes, unfocused and glazed, swept across the crowd, looking for help, finding only people who looked away. Then her eyes found Sarah's. Everything else disappeared. The market noise faded. The crowd became a blur. There was only this elderly woman, clearly in medical distress, silently pleading for someone to stop. 10 minutes. Sarah thought about Grace, waking up confused and scared, about the medical bills, about Carmen's encouraging smile, about her mother who'd worked herself to death trying to give Sarah opportunities. 9 minutes. The woman tried to speak. Her lips formed words Sarah couldn't hear, but she could read them clearly. "Help me." 8 minutes. Sarah looked down First Avenue, where the Seattle Art Museum waited, where Richard Pemberton and the hiring committee were preparing questions, deciding who deserved this chance, where her future was supposed to begin. 7 minutes. The woman's eyes never left Sarah's face, desperate, frightened, alone despite being surrounded by hundreds of people. Sarah dropped her portfolio and ran. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Sarah knelt beside the bench. Up close, the distress was even more obvious. The woman's skin was clammy, her pulse rapid and thready. "My chest," the woman managed, her voice barely audible. Can't breathe properly." Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling for help. Just stay with me." 911, what's your emergency? "I'm at Pike Place Market. There's an elderly woman having chest pains and difficulty breathing. She's conscious but in severe distress." Behind her, Sarah heard her own phone ringing. The Seattle Art Museum. She declined the call. Paramedics are en route, the dispatcher said. Stay on the line. Sarah loosened the woman's collar. Ma'am, what's your name? Eleanor. The word came out as barely more than a whisper. I was supposed to meet someone. I can't remember. It's okay, Eleanor. Help is coming. I'm Sarah. I'm not going anywhere. Sarah's phone rang again. Seattle Art Museum. She let it go to voicemail. A man in a business suit stepped forward. I'm a nurse. Can I assist? Together, they monitored Eleanor until the ambulance arrived at 3:03 p.m., red and blue lights cutting through the gray afternoon. The paramedics worked quickly. Their questions were rapid fire: medications, allergies, medical history. Eleanor tried to answer, but kept getting confused, her words trailing off. She clutched Sarah's hand tighter each time. Ma'am, we need to transport you to Swedish Medical Center. Can you tell us who to contact? Eleanor's eyes darted around in panic. My son, James, but I can't remember the number. Are you family? The paramedic asked Sarah. No, I just found her and she stays with me. Eleanor's voice was suddenly clear and firm. Please, don't make me go alone. Sarah thought about the interview, probably already in progress, about her phone, which had rung twice more, about the opportunity slipping away with every passing minute. Then she looked at Eleanor's frightened face. I'll ride with her, Sarah said. As they loaded Eleanor into the ambulance, Sarah grabbed her portfolio from where it had fallen. The leather was scuffed now, a corner bent from hitting the ground. Sarah climbed into the ambulance and sat beside the stretcher. Eleanor's hand immediately found hers. Thank you, Eleanor whispered through the oxygen mask. Thank you for stopping. Through the ambulance's rear windows, Sarah watched Pike Place Market recede into the distance. Somewhere in those glass towers downtown, her dream job was being offered to someone else. At exactly 3 p.m., as the Seattle Art Museum hiring committee took their seats, Sarah Collins held the hand of a stranger and listened to sirens wail, one who had the good sense not to stop for a stranger. The ER waiting room at Swedish Medical Center had seen better days. Cracked plastic chairs, humming fluorescent lights, a TV no one watched. The smell of antiseptic mixed with stale coffee. Sarah sat in the corner, staring at her phone. 7 missed calls, 3 voicemails. Carmen. Sarah, call me back. Sam just called the library asking if you were coming. Seattle Art Museum. Miss Collins, this is Jennifer from Sam. We have you scheduled for a 3 p.m. interview. Please call us back. The final voicemail, time-stamped 3:35 p.m. Miss Collins, we've waited as long as we could. Unfortunately, we need to move forward with other candidates. Sarah sat down heavily, her portfolio clutched against her chest. The leather was scuffed, the corner bent, just like her dreams. She'd done the right thing. She'd saved someone's life. So why did it feel like she'd just destroyed her own? Her phone buzzed. Carmen. She answered. Oh, thank God. Sarah, what happened?
I found someone collapsed at Pike Place Market. Elderly woman having a medical emergency. I called 911 and rode with her to Swedish. Oh. They left me a voicemail. Moved on to other candidates. Sarah, I need to go. They're bringing her back from tests soon. Wait, you did the right thing. Did I? Because Grace still needs care I can't afford. The rent is still due. And now I don't have any way to fix it. Sarah hung up before Carmen could respond. The automatic doors opened. A well-dressed woman in scrubs emerged. Family of Eleanor Hartwell? Sarah stood. I'm the one who came in with her. The doctor approached. I'm Dr. Sarah Mitchell, geriatric specialist. You're not family? No. I found her at Pike Place Market, having chest pains. I called 911. Dr. Mitchell's expression softened. Then Eleanor is very lucky. What you witnessed was a diabetic emergency, complicated by medication confusion and early-stage dementia. If she'd been alone much longer, the outcome could have been very different. Early-stage dementia, just like Grace. Is she okay now? She's stable. Her son has been contacted. She's been asking for you, the young woman who stopped. Dr. Mitchell paused. Before I take you back, may I ask something? You look exhausted. The kind of exhaustion I see in caregivers. Are you caring for someone with dementia? The question cracked Sarah's careful composure. My grandmother, Grace. Advancing dementia. I'm her only caregiver. How long? 2 years since diagnosis. Dr. Mitchell's expression shifted to recognition. My mother had Alzheimer's. I understand what you're carrying. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. I had a job interview today for a curator position at SAM. It would have changed everything. Covered Grace's care, our rent, the medical bills, but I missed it because I stopped for Eleanor. And you're wondering if you made the wrong choice. I know I made the wrong choice. Dr. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. When my mother was dying, I had to choose between her bedside and a prestigious fellowship. I chose the fellowship, got everything I wanted, the career, the reputation, the salary, but I never forgave myself. She met Sarah's eyes. You made the choice that lets you live with yourself. That matters more than people realize. They walked through automatic doors into the ER treatment area. Eleanor was in Bay 4, propped up in bed, color returning to her cheeks. Her bearing was unmistakable, that of someone accustomed to command. Her eyes locked onto Sarah the moment she entered. There you are! They tried to send you away. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. You saved my life. The very least I can do is thank you properly. Eleanor studied Sarah. Dr. Mitchell tells me I had a diabetic crisis. I stopped taking my insulin and wandered away from my doctor's appointment. I don't remember most of it. You don't need to. I remember the market, being confused, frightened. Everyone walking past me like I didn't exist. Eleanor's voice trembled. And then, I remember your eyes. You saw me. Anyone would have. Anyone didn't. You did. Eleanor reached for Sarah's hand. Why did you stop? Sarah looked down at their joined hands. You looked scared and alone. I know what that feels like. Because of your grandmother. Sarah's head snapped up. How? Dr. Mitchell mentioned it. Eleanor's grip tightened. I'm sorry. Dementia is cruel. Eleanor noticed Sarah's portfolio, battered and scuffed. What's in the portfolio? Nothing important. Sarah? Eleanor's tone was gentle but firm. What's in the portfolio? Sarah hesitated, then pulled it onto her lap. Art history materials for a job interview at SAM at 3 p.m. The silence was heavy. You missed a job interview to help me. Yes. What kind of position? Curator at the Seattle Art Museum. Eleanor's expression changed completely. Sam, the curator position. She leaned back, studying Sarah with new intensity. Open the portfolio. Inside were years of self-education, sketches from museum visits, notes on technique, a worn copy of Gardner's Art Through the Ages, and her thesis from her master's program. Eleanor reached for the thesis. "May I?" She read in silence, turning pages, occasionally nodding. When she finally looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "This is brilliant. Democratizing access, community arts programming for underserved populations. This is exactly what the arts world needs. It's just academic work." "No, this is what matters." Eleanor closed the thesis. "Tell me about yourself, everything." And somehow, exhausted and heartbroken, Sarah found herself telling the truth. About her parents' restaurant, about falling in love with art through library books, about community college and working 3 jobs, about getting accepted to University of Washington and having to decline when her parents got sick, about her mother's death, Grace's diagnosis, the medical bills, the constant struggle, about the curator position that would have meant Grace could afford proper care, about today, about making the choice that destroyed everything she'd worked for. "I did the right thing," Sarah finished quietly. "But it doesn't feel right. It feels like I failed everyone who depends on me." Eleanor was silent. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Your grandmother is very lucky to have you. She deserves better."
She has someone who would sacrifice her own dreams for a stranger. That's not nothing. Before Sarah could respond, the curtain swept open. A man in his late 40s, impeccably dressed, stepped in. His face showed relief when he saw Eleanor, then wariness when he noticed Sarah. "Mother, thank God." He moved to Eleanor's bedside. "Who's this?" "James, this is Sarah Collins. She saved my life." James Hartwell studied Sarah with penetrating intensity, assessing whether she was a threat, whether she wanted something. "Saved your life?" "I found your mother having a medical emergency at Pike Place Market," Sarah explained. "I called 911 and stayed with her." "And rode in the ambulance," Eleanor added, "even though it meant missing something critically important." James' expression didn't soften. "That's very kind. We're extremely grateful." His tone suggested suspicion more than gratitude. Sarah stood, picking up her portfolio. "I should go. I'm glad you're feeling better, Eleanor." "Wait!" Eleanor reached out. "James, she missed a job interview to help me. At Sam, for the curator position." James's eyebrows rose. "That's unfortunate timing." "Unfortunate?" Eleanor's voice sharpened. "She gave up her dream job. The least we can—" "James, I'm sure Miss Collins can explain to the museum." "They already called," Sarah said quietly. "They've moved on to other candidates." Uncomfortable silence. James looked between them, calculating the appropriate response. "Perhaps we can make a call. The foundation has connections." "No." The word came out sharp. "I don't need anyone pulling strings. Thank you, but I'll figure it out on my own." Eleanor's expression shifted to approval. "James, step outside. I need to speak with Sarah privately." After he left, Eleanor gestured for Sarah to sit. "My son is protective, but his heart is in the right place. He thinks I'm here because I want something." "Are you?" "No." "Then you're the first person I've met in decades who doesn't." Eleanor's smile was sad. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" "Should I?" Eleanor laughed. "Eleanor Hartwell, founder of the Hartwell Foundation, one of the largest arts endowments in the Pacific Northwest." Sarah's stomach dropped. The Hartwell Foundation, $800 million in assets, funding for dozens of museums and cultural programs. "I didn't know," Sarah whispered. "Of course you didn't, which makes what you did even more remarkable." Eleanor leaned forward. "Sarah, I want your contact information. This conversation isn't over. I don't understand. You will. But right now, go home. Check on your grandmother. Rest. Tomorrow, come to the foundation offices, 10 a.m. Why? Because when I was confused and frightened, you saw me as a person who needed help, not as Eleanor Hartwell, philanthropist, just as someone who needed kindness. That's rarer than you think, and it's exactly what I've been looking for. Sarah wrote her number on a scrap of paper. Eleanor tucked it carefully into her purse. One more thing, Eleanor said as Sarah turned to leave. You made the choice that lets you sleep at night. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you that was wrong. Sarah left Swedish Medical Center at 5:47 p.m. The October sun was setting, casting long shadows. She walked to the bus stop, portfolio clutched against her chest, trying to process everything. She had saved someone's life. She had destroyed her future. And tomorrow morning, she had no idea what she was walking into. But for the first time all day, Sarah felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope, exactly. That felt too fragile. It was possibility. And sometimes, that's enough to get you through the night. Sarah returned to her Capitol Hill apartment at 8 p.m. to find chaos. Grace stood in the living room in her nightgown, clutching a photo album and crying. Linda Wong hovered nearby, speaking softly in Cantonese. She not recognized me. Think I stranger. Grace's tear-stained face turned toward Sarah with confusion and fear. Who are you? What do you want from me? The words hit like a physical blow. Popo, it's me. It's Sarah. Sarah. Grace repeated the name like a foreign word. I don't know any Sarah. It took 40 minutes to calm Grace down, showing photographs, playing Cantonese opera, finally getting her to take her medications. Linda stayed until Grace fell asleep, then squeezed Sarah's hand at the door. After Linda left, Sarah sat at the kitchen table and broke down. The interview was gone, Grace was getting worse, the medical bills were still there, and tomorrow she had a mysterious meeting with Eleanor Hartwell. For what purpose, she had no idea. Her phone rang. Carmen. Sarah told her everything. Eleanor's collapse, the hospital, missing the interview, tomorrow's meeting at the Hartwell Foundation. Wait, Eleanor Hartwell? The Eleanor Hartwell? Sarah, the Hartwell Foundation funds half the cultural programs in this city. Eleanor Hartwell is Seattle royalty. Sarah felt her stomach twist. She wants me at her office tomorrow at 10 a.m. This could be huge, or it could be nothing. Probably just a proper thank you. After they hung up, Sarah Googled Eleanor Hartwell. The results were overwhelming. Forbes articles about her philanthropy, photos from galas and museum openings, a Wikipedia page detailing her late husband's suicide and her subsequent dedication to making art accessible.
And the Hartwell Foundation itself, $800 million in assets. Grants to museums, schools, community centers, programs that brought art education to underserved communities. Programs exactly like the ones Sarah had written about in her thesis. Sarah closed her laptop and looked around their cramped apartment, at the medical bills stacked on the counter, at Grace's bedroom door, behind which her grandmother slept, temporarily peaceful, at her own reflection in the dark window. Tomorrow would either change everything or confirm that she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. The Hartwell Foundation occupied a renovated brick building in downtown Seattle. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, wearing the same blazer from yesterday, her portfolio more battered than ever. The lobby took her breath away. Original artwork lined the walls. A Chihuly glass sculpture dominated the reception area, catching morning light. Eleanor's office overlooked Elliott Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the water and Olympic Mountains beyond. Eleanor sat behind a mahogany desk, looking healthier but tired. James stood beside her, expression professionally neutral. Sarah, Eleanor rose to greet her warmly. Thank you for coming. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks to you. Eleanor gestured to the chairs. Please, sit. James remained standing, watching Sarah with that same assessing look from yesterday. Sarah, I'll get straight to the point, Eleanor began. Yesterday, you sacrificed something important. We'd like to offer you compensation. James pulled an envelope from his jacket. We've prepared a check for $10,000. It's our way of expressing gratitude. Sarah stared at the envelope. $10,000. 3 months of Grace's care. It would change everything. No. The word came out sharp and final. I'm sorry, James said. I don't want your money. Sarah stood, hands shaking. I didn't help your mother because I expected payment. I helped her because she needed help. You can't pay me for being a decent human being. Eleanor's expression shifted to something unreadable. Sarah. Thank you for the offer, but no. Sarah grabbed her portfolio. I hope you feel better, Eleanor. She was halfway to the door when Eleanor spoke. What would you do if money wasn't an obstacle? Sarah turned back. What? Your thesis. If you had unlimited resources, what would you build? Sarah stood frozen between suspicion and hope. Finally, she answered, I'd bring art to the people instead of waiting for them to come to museums. Pop-up workshops and community centers, mobile exhibitions in neighborhoods that never see original artwork, partner with schools, make culture accessible instead of aspirational. Why? Because art isn't decoration, it's how we understand ourselves. But right now, it belongs to people who can afford it. Everyone else just gets told they don't belong. Eleanor was crying now. That's what my husband believed. That's why I built this foundation. But I forgot. She turned from the window. I'm dying, Sarah. The dementia is progressing. I have maybe 2 years before I can function. 2 years to make sure this foundation does what it was meant to do. I don't want to pay you for saving my life. I want to hire you to save my life's work. Director of Community Arts Initiatives. Salary, $85,000 annually, and will establish a scholarship fund for Grace's care at Emerald Heights Memory Facility. Sarah couldn't breathe. This is charity. No, I'm hiring the person who can fulfill my mission. You refused money for kindness. That's integrity. You wrote the thesis I've been searching for. That's expertise. You stopped when everyone walked by. That's character. Sarah looked at James, whose expression had softened. You really want this? He said, I want my mother's legacy to matter. I think you're the person who can make that happen. Sarah thought about Grace, the medical bills, Carmen struggling to buy Diego shoes, about every choice that led to this moment. Yes, she whispered. I accept. Eleanor's smile was radiant. Then let's change the world together. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the Central District Community Center watching Carmen help children mix paint colors. Diego Rodriguez worked beside his mother, demonstrating brush techniques to a shy girl who'd never held a paintbrush before. The transformation had been dizzying. Grace now received professional care at Emerald Heights Memory Facility. Sarah had a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. Carmen was her assistant director with financial stability and meaningful work. But the real work had been building the Community Arts Initiative. They'd launched pilot programs in 3 underserved Seattle neighborhoods, Central District, Rainier Valley, and South Park. 200 children attended weekly workshops. 15 local artists were hired as instructors. 3 mobile exhibitions had brought museum works directly to communities. Diego had become the program's success story. The shy boy who'd never been to a museum now had his work displayed in a local gallery. But not everyone was celebrating. That afternoon's Hartwell Foundation board meeting had been tense.
Richard Pemberton, now on the Arts Allocation Committee, had questioned the program's return on investment. He argued, these communities can't donate back to the foundation. Is this really the best use of our resources? Sarah had presented impact metrics. Eleanor, whose dementia symptoms were becoming more visible, had defended Sarah fiercely. But James had remained silent, caught between his mother's vision and the board's fiscal concerns. Now, watching the children paint, she wondered if she was building something sustainable or just performing gratitude.
"You're overthinking again," Carmen said, appearing at her elbow. "I can tell by the wrinkle between your eyebrows. Pemberton wants to cut our budget by 60%. Look at them. Really, look." Carmen turned Sarah toward the children. "That's Maria. Her mom works 3 jobs. That's Marcus, failing school until he started coming here. That's Diego, who actually believes he can be an artist now." Carmen's voice was fierce. "You changed my life. You gave me a job that pays enough that Diego doesn't worry about dinner. You created something that makes kids feel like they matter. That's not charity. That's changing the world." Sarah's phone buzzed. Richard Pemberton. "Sarah, I've been thinking about your presentation. Would you be willing to present your model at the National Arts Endowment Conference next month? I think this could be replicated nationally." Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. Richard Pemberton, who'd rejected her curator application, who'd questioned her program's value, was offering to help scale this work nationally. "I'd be honored," Sarah managed. After hanging up, she looked around the community center, at the children painting with joy, at Carmen, whose life had stabilized, at Diego, who'd found his voice, at the parents watching from doorways, some in work uniforms, because they'd come straight from their shifts. This was why she'd stopped at Pike Place Market. Not for this specific outcome, she couldn't have imagined this, but because stopping was who she was. And for the first time since that day 6 months ago, Sarah understood that she hadn't destroyed her future when she helped Eleanor. She'd discovered it. 1 year after that fateful day at Pike Place Market, Sarah stood in the Hartwell Foundation conference room, facing the full board of directors. Her hands trembled slightly as she advanced her presentation slide, but her voice was steady. "The Community Arts Initiative has now served 12 Seattle neighborhoods," she said, gesturing to the map behind her. "We've reached over 800 children and families. Our mobile exhibitions have brought works from the Seattle Art Museum, the Fry, and the Henry Art Gallery directly to community centers, libraries, and schools." Richard Pemberton sat at the far end of the table, his expression unreadable. He'd been the one to question her program's sustainability 6 months ago. Now he was the one who'd helped her secure the National Arts Endowment Conference presentation. "The metrics are impressive," said Margaret Chen, a longtime board member. "But help me understand the long-term financial model. These communities can't provide significant donations back to the foundation. How do we sustain this?" Sarah had anticipated this question. She'd spent weeks preparing it with Carmen and James. "You're right, that we won't see major donor returns from these neighborhoods, but we're measuring the wrong metrics. Our program has partnered with Seattle Public Schools to integrate arts education into 5 underserved schools. The district is now covering 50% of instructor costs. That's sustainable funding." She advanced to the next slide. "We've also trained 15 local artists as teaching fellows. 3 have gone on to open their own community studios. They're creating a pipeline of arts educators who understand these communities because they come from them." Eleanor sat at the head of the table, quieter than usual. Her dementia had progressed visibly over the past year. Some days she was sharp and engaged. Other days, like today, she struggled to follow complex discussions. But her eyes never left Sarah's face, and occasionally she nodded with approval. James leaned forward. "Sarah, walk us through the replication model. If other cities want to implement this program, what would that look like?" I felt a surge of gratitude. James was giving me an opening to address the board's real concern. Was this just a Seattle experiment or something that could expand the foundation's impact nationally? "We've developed a toolkit based on our first year of operations. It includes curriculum frameworks, partnership templates, assessment tools, and budget models. 5 cities have already expressed interest: Portland, Tacoma, Spokane, Oakland, and Denver. She pulled up a slide showing testimonials. But the real story is in the lives we've changed. Diego Rodriguez started in our program as a shy 10-year-old who never held a paintbrush. Now he's 11, and his work was just accepted into a juried youth exhibition at SAM. Margaret Chen's expression softened. That's the boy Carmen's always talking about, your assistant director's son. Yes, Carmen Rodriguez is living proof of how this program creates opportunity beyond just the children we serve. She was working double shifts at the library and a catering company when I hired her. Now she's building a career in arts administration and considering graduate school. Richard Pemberton cleared his throat. Sarah, I was skeptical of this program initially. I thought it was, and I apologize for this characterization, a vanity project. Gratitude dressed up as philanthropy. Sarah's stomach tightened, but she held his gaze.
Eleanor spoke for the first time, her voice slightly uncertain but determined. This is what we should have been doing all along. Not just giving money to institutions that serve people who already have access, but building pathways for everyone else. She looked around the table. Sarah stopped for me when I was alone and scared. She showed me what real kindness looks like. Now she's showing us what real impact looks like. The board voted unanimously to fully fund the program for another 3 years and to allocate resources for national expansion. After the meeting, Sarah found James waiting in the hallway. "That was brilliant," he said. "You've come a long way from that day in the hospital when you refused our money." I almost threw up before the presentation. James smiled. "Leadership is just terror management with better clothes." His expression grew more serious. "Sarah, I need to talk to you about my mother." They walked to his office, where James closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit. "Dr. Mitchell says Mom has maybe 6 months before she'll need full-time care. The dementia is accelerating." James's voice was thick with emotion. "She's been talking about succession planning for the Foundation's leadership. That's between you and the board. She wants to make you executor of the community programs." James held up a hand as Sarah started to protest. "Not the entire foundation, just the Community Arts Initiative and related programs. Legal protection to ensure they continue even after she can't advocate for them." Sarah felt the weight of what he was saying. "James, that should be you. She's your mother. And she trusts me with the institution, but she trusts you with the mission." "That's not an insult to me, Sarah. It's the smartest decision she could make. I'm good at budgets and operations. You're good at remembering why we exist in the first place. I don't know if I can—" "You already are. You've been doing it for a year." James pulled out a folder. "These are the legal documents. You don't have to decide today, but think about it. Because Mom's right. Someone needs to protect what you've built, and it should be you." That evening, Sarah visited Grace at Emerald Heights. Her grandmother was having one of her clearer days, sitting in the garden with other residents watching the sunset over Lake Washington. "Sarah," Grace's face lit up with recognition, a gift that came less frequently now. "You came." "I always come, Popo." She sat beside her on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade across the water. Then Grace spoke in Cantonese, switching to English mid-sentence as she often did now. "Your mother would be proud. So proud. You help so many people." "I'm just doing my job." "No. You do more. You stop. When others walk by, you stop. You help me remember." Sarah's throat tightened. "I love you, Popo." "I know. Even when I forget your name, I know someone loves me. That's enough." Driving home that night, Sarah thought about Eleanor's offer, about becoming the guardian of a mission that had transformed her own life while transforming hundreds of others, about the responsibility of protecting something bigger than herself, about the choice she'd made 1 year ago to stop for a stranger. That choice had led to this moment, not through magic or karma, but through the simple truth that when you choose humanity over convenience, sometimes you discover your purpose. Sarah pulled out her phone at a red light and texted James, "I'll do it. Let's talk about the details tomorrow." The response came immediately. "Mom will be relieved." "So am I." Sarah smiled and put her phone away. Ahead of her, the Seattle skyline glittered against the darkening sky. Somewhere in one of those buildings, children were learning to see themselves as artists. Families were discovering that culture belonged to them too. Communities were being transformed by the simple, radical act of being seen and valued. All because one woman chose to stop, and another woman chose to notice. 18 months after Pike Place Market, Sarah stood in a classroom at Rainier Valley High School, watching 15-year-old Maya Tran present her self-portrait to the Community Arts Initiative's advanced workshop. "I used mixed media," Maya explained, gesturing to her piece, a striking combination of painting, collage, and embroidered fabric. "The Vietnamese text is from my grandmother's letters. The English is from my college essays. The fabric is from my mom's work uniform." The piece was extraordinary, raw and technically accomplished in ways that transcended her formal training. Carmen, standing beside Sarah, whispered, "That kid's going places." "If we can get her there," Sarah whispered back. After the presentation, Maya approached Sarah hesitantly. "Miss Collins, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "My guidance counselor says I should apply to art school, but my parents want me to study engineering. They say art isn't a real career. Did you ever have to choose between what you wanted and what was practical?"
Sarah thought about the University of Washington scholarship she'd declined, about the SAM curator position she'd missed, about all the choices that had led to this moment. "Yes," Sarah said honestly, "and I chose practical every time, until one day I chose what was right instead. That's what led me here." "But what if I fail? What if I choose art and it doesn't work out? What if you choose engineering and spend your whole life wondering what you could have been?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Maya a photo of Diego Rodriguez's work hanging in a gallery. "That's Diego. He's 12. 2 years ago, he'd never been to a museum. Now he's selling pieces and helping teach younger kids, not because he chose between practical and passion, but because someone made space for him to do both." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if my parents will understand." "Then let me talk to them. That's what we're here for." The conversation with Maya's parents happened 2 weeks later, with Linda Wong serving as translator. Sarah explained the scholarship opportunities, the career paths in arts education and cultural programming, the ways art could be both passion and profession. By the end, Maya's mother was crying, and her father was asking about application deadlines. But not every conversation went so well. The Hartwell Foundation board meeting in late November was brutal. Eleanor's health had declined sharply. She now attended meetings remotely when she was lucid enough, but most strategic decisions fell to James and the board was getting restless. "We've invested $2.3 million in the Community Arts Initiative over 18 months, said Robert Hutchinson, the foundation's CFO. "Our return on investment, measured in donor cultivation and institutional partnerships, is minimal." "That's because we're measuring the wrong things," Sarah countered, keeping her voice level despite her frustration. "We've created sustainable partnerships with 5 school districts. We've trained 43 teaching artists who are now employed. We've served over 1,200 families." "Served them how?" Margaret Chen asked, not hostile but genuinely questioning. "Sarah, help me understand the long-term value proposition. These families can't attend our fundraising galas. They can't donate significant amounts. What's the institutional benefit?" Sarah took a deep breath. This was the question she'd been dreading. "There isn't one. Not in the way you're defining it. These families won't show up on our donor rolls. They won't buy tables at our gala. They won't have buildings named after them." The room was silent. "But they'll show up in every other metric that matters," Sarah continued. "School attendance and graduation rates in our partner schools are up. Juvenile crime in neighborhoods where we operate is down.
Mental health outcomes for participating youth show significant improvement. And 27 kids who never thought college was possible are now applying because they discovered they had talent and someone noticed. She pulled up a slide. This is Diego Rodriguez. 2 years ago, his single mom worked 3 jobs to keep them housed. Now she's my assistant director, and he's a teaching fellow helping younger kids. This is Maya Tron, applying to RISD and Cooper Union with a portfolio that wouldn't exist without this program. This is Marcus Johnson, who was failing out of school and now's on track to graduate with honors. Those are individual success stories, Robert said. Admirable, but anecdotal. No, James' voice cut through the tension. He'd been quiet until now, letting Sarah make her case. Sarah, show them the economic analysis. Sarah pulled up the next slide, grateful for James's intervention. We commissioned an independent study of our program's economic impact. For every dollar we invest, we generate $3.20 in long-term community value. That includes increased earning potential, reduced social services costs, and economic activity generated by artists we've trained. That's long-term, Robert countered. What about the Foundation's short-term financial health? The Foundation has $800 million in assets. We're not in financial danger. The question isn't whether we can afford this program, it's whether we can afford not to do it. Margaret Chen leaned forward. James, I respect your support of Sarah's work, but your mother appointed you executive director to ensure fiscal responsibility. Are you saying we should ignore financial sustainability? I'm saying my mother built this foundation to make art accessible to everyone, not just people who can afford gala tickets. Sarah's program is exactly what we should have been doing for 40 years. If we abandon it now because it doesn't generate donor revenue, we're betraying everything this foundation stands for. The room erupted in crosstalk. Sarah sat quietly watching board members argue about her program's future, feeling helpless and frustrated. Finally, Richard Pemberton raised his hand. The room quieted. I was the one who questioned this program most vocally. I thought it was charity, not strategy. But I was wrong. He looked at Sarah. Last month, I attended the opening of Sarah's mobile exhibition in South Park. A 70-year-old Vietnamese woman stood in front of a Rothko for 20 minutes, crying. She told me, through a translator, that she'd lived in Seattle for 40 years and never seen anything like it, never been made to feel welcome in a museum.
Pemberton's voice thickened. That woman represents tens of thousands of people in this city who've been told, implicitly or explicitly, that art isn't for them. Sarah's program says otherwise. And if we abandon it because it doesn't make financial sense on a spreadsheet, we're just another institution that claims to serve the public while actually serving ourselves. The vote was close, 7-5, in favor of continuing the program for another 2 years. Sarah felt relief mixed with exhaustion. 2 years was a reprieve, not a solution. After the meeting, James found her in her office, staring at her laptop. You did well in there, he said. I almost lost. You didn't lose, and 2 years is enough time to prove the model works. James sat across from her. Sarah, I need to tell you something. My mother wants to see you tomorrow at Emerald Heights. She has something important to discuss. Is she okay? Physically, yes, but her lucid moments are getting rarer. When she has them, she's focused on legacy planning. She wants to formalize your role as executor of the community programs. Sarah's stomach twisted. James, we've talked about this. That should be... It should be you, James said firmly. She's made her decision. Tomorrow, just listen to what she has to say. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her Capitol Hill apartment, the nice 2-bedroom she could now afford, and thought about the impossible journey from that day at Pike Place Market to this moment. She'd saved a stranger's life. That stranger had saved hers in return, and together they'd built something that was saving hundreds of other lives, one child, one family, one community at a time. But the weight of protecting it,
of ensuring it survived beyond Eleanor, felt crushing. Sarah pulled out her phone and texted Carmen. "Are you awake?" The response came immediately. "Always. What's wrong?" "Eleanor wants to make me executor, legally responsible for protecting the programs." "And you're scared?" "Terrified." "Good. That means you understand what's at stake." A pause, then, "Sarah, you stopped for a stranger when you had everything to lose. This is just doing that again, on a bigger scale." Sarah smiled despite herself. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just finally started listening." The next morning, Sarah drove to Emerald Heights with a mixture of dread and determination. Whatever Eleanor wanted to discuss, she owed it to the woman who'd changed her life to listen. Eleanor sat in the sunroom at Emerald Heights, wrapped in a cashmere blanket despite the warm spring afternoon. Dr. Mitchell sat beside her, a professional courtesy that signaled the meeting's importance. "Sarah." Eleanor's voice was weaker than Sarah remembered, but her eyes held their familiar sharpness. "Thank you for coming."
Of course. How are you feeling? Dying slowly, which gives me time to be irritating about details. Eleanor smiled, the humor not quite reaching her eyes. "Sit, please." Sarah sat across from them, aware of Dr. Mitchell's clinical gaze assessing her. "I'll be direct," Eleanor said. "I'm running out of time. Good days are becoming rare. Soon I won't be able to protect what we've built together." She reached for a folder on the side table. "These are legal documents naming you as executor for the Community Arts Initiative and all related programs." "Eleanor, let me finish." Eleanor's tone was gentle but firm. "I've watched you build something extraordinary. Not just programs, but a philosophy, a way of thinking about who art serves and why. James understands the institution, but you understand the mission. Your son should be the one. My son agrees with me," James said from the doorway. Sarah hadn't heard him enter. "Sarah, Mom's right. I'm good at keeping the foundation solvent. You're good at remembering why it exists." Eleanor opened the folder. "This isn't just about legal authority. It's about trust. When I collapsed at Pike Place Market, you stopped. You sacrificed everything to help a stranger. That's who you are. That's who needs to protect this work." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. "What if I fail? What if I can't protect it from board members who want to cut funding or redirect resources?" "Then you fight." Eleanor's voice was suddenly strong, fierce. "You fight the way you fought for your grandmother, the way you fought to help me, the way you fought for every child in your programs." Dr. Mitchell spoke for the first time. "Sarah, Eleanor has days, maybe weeks, before her cognitive decline accelerates significantly. This decision needs to be made now." The weight of it settled over Sarah like a physical thing. Accepting meant taking responsibility for a mission that served hundreds of families. It meant potential conflict with board members who wanted to cut funding or redirect resources. It meant stopping, once again, when walking away would be easier. "I'll do it," Sarah said quietly. "I'll protect what we've built." Eleanor's relief was visible. "Thank you. Thank you." They spent the next hour reviewing the legal documents, the protections built into the Foundation's charter, the financial structures that would sustain the programs. James explained the board dynamics, the allies she could count on, the opposition she'd face.
"Just show up anyway." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Tell them your story. All of it. The Sam interview you missed, the choice you made.
Show them what authentic kindness looks like when it transforms systems instead of just individuals. 2 weeks later, Eleanor collapsed again during a family dinner. This time, the doctor said she'd need to move to full-time memory care. Her lucid moments would become increasingly rare. James called Sarah at 11 p.m. "She's asking for you." Sarah arrived at the hospital to find Eleanor in a private room, James and Dr. Mitchell standing vigil. Eleanor's eyes were closed, but they flickered open when Sarah entered. "The girl who stopped," Eleanor murmured. "You came. Always. Tell me about the programs, the children." Sarah pulled a chair close and described the latest achievements: Diego's new teaching fellowship, Maya's acceptance to RISD with a full scholarship, the expansion to 2 new neighborhoods, the partnership with Seattle Public Schools. Sarah listened with her eyes closed, occasionally smiling. When Sarah finished, Eleanor opened her eyes with sudden clarity. "I'm glad I wandered away from that doctor's appointment," she said. "Glad I got confused and scared, because it led me to you, and you led me back to myself." "You gave me everything," Sarah whispered. "No, you gave me everything. You reminded me why I built that foundation, why any of this matters." Eleanor's grip on Sarah's hand tightened. "Promise me something." "Anything." "Keep stopping. When everyone else walks by, keep stopping, because that's how we change the world, one person at a time." "I promise." Eleanor's eyes drifted closed again. Dr. Mitchell touched Sarah's shoulder gently. "She needs to rest." In the hallway, James walked Sarah to the elevator. "Thank you for coming. It meant everything to her. She changed my life. You changed hers too, more than you know. The NAE conference is in 3 weeks. Are you ready?" Sarah thought about Eleanor's words. "You're never ready for the moments that matter most." "No," she admitted, "but I'll show up anyway." The National Arts Endowment Conference was held in Washington, D.C. at a hotel that probably cost more per night than Sarah used to make in a month. She arrived 2 days early to prepare, rehearsing her speech in the hotel room, fighting the imposter syndrome that still whispered she didn't belong. Carmen had flown out with her for moral support. "You're going to kill this," Carmen insisted the night before Sarah's keynote. "What if they don't care? What if they think it's just a feel-good story?" "Then they're idiots. But they won't, because you're not just telling a story, you're showing them a blueprint." The morning of the keynote, Sarah's hand shook as she got ready. She wore a dress Carmen had helped her pick out. Professional but not trying too hard, stylish but not pretentious. Her mother's pearl earrings, a reminder of where she came from and why this mattered. The ballroom held 300 arts leaders from across the country: museum directors, foundation executives, cultural policymakers, people who controlled billions in arts funding and determined which communities got access to culture. Sarah walked to the podium, her heart pounding. "2 years ago," she began, "I was rushing to a job interview that would have changed my life. I was about to miss it because I stopped to help a stranger having a medical emergency. That choice cost me everything I thought I wanted, but it led me to discover what I actually needed." She told them Eleanor's story, her own story, the story of how one act of kindness had created a ripple effect that touched hundreds of lives. But this isn't a fairy tale about karma or cosmic justice. This is about what happens when we build systems around authentic values instead of transactional relationships. When we measure impact by lives changed instead of donors cultivated. When we stop asking, what can these communities give us, and start asking, what do these communities need? She walked them through the Community Arts Initiative model, the data, the outcomes, the economic analysis, the proof that investing in underserved communities wasn't charity,
It was smart, sustainable, transformative work. The arts world has spent decades talking about access and inclusion. But talk is easy. Action is hard. Action means redirecting resources from prestigious projects that attract wealthy donors to community programs that serve people who can't pay you back. Action means trusting that the value of art isn't measured in gala ticket sales, but in moments of human connection and discovery. She showed them photos: Diego teaching younger children, Maya's self-portrait, the Vietnamese woman crying in front of a Rothko. These are the people we claim to serve when we call ourselves public institutions. But for most of American history, we've served them with contempt disguised as concern. We've told them art is for other people. We've built museums like temples that require supplication instead of offering invitation. Sarah's voice was fierce now. The Community Arts Initiative says something different. It says art belongs to you. Culture is yours. You don't need to change who you are to deserve access. We'll meet you where you are.
She paused, scanning the audience. Some faces were moved, others skeptical, a few hostile. I know what some of you are thinking, that this sounds expensive, unsustainable, that we can't afford to serve everyone. But I'm here to tell you, we can't afford not to, because every child we tell doesn't belong grows into an adult who believes culture isn't for them, and then they raise children who believe the same thing, and the cycle continues. Sarah gripped the podium. Or we can stop. Right now, today. We can choose to build something different, something that actually lives up to our mission statements instead of just framing them nicely on our walls. She ended with Eleanor's words. Keep stopping. When everyone else walks by, keep stopping. Because that's how we change the world. One person, one community, one moment of authentic connection at a time. The silence that followed her speech felt eternal. Then someone started clapping. Richard Pemberton, standing at the back of the room, his face wet with tears. The applause spread like a wave, building until the entire ballroom was standing. Sarah stood at the podium, overwhelmed, thinking about Eleanor watching from her care facility room back in Seattle, about Grace, who'd passed away peacefully 3 months ago, about her mother, who taught her to stop and notice beauty wherever she found it, about the choice she'd made at Pike Place Market that had led to this moment. After her speech, she was surrounded by arts leaders wanting to learn more, to replicate the model, to partner with the Hartwell Foundation. 5 major foundations pledged funding support. 10 cities requested consultation. Carmen found her in the chaos, tears streaming down her face. You did it! You actually changed everything! That night, Sarah FaceTimed James. How is she? Mom's having a good day. Let me put you on. Eleanor's face appeared, confused at first, then clearing with recognition. Sarah! The conference, how did it go? We did it. Your mission is going to reach communities across the entire country. Eleanor smiled, tears on her cheeks. Not my mission, ours, because you stopped. Because you noticed. And in that moment, Sarah understood the full circle completely. 2 years ago at Pike Place Market, she'd stopped for a stranger. That stranger had noticed her character, her commitment, her capacity to care. Together, they'd built something that would outlive them both. The question was never whether Sarah would protect Eleanor's legacy. It was whether she'd learn to see her own. 2 years after Pike Place Market, Sarah rushed through the Washington Convention Center, late for a meeting with potential partner organizations. The National Arts Endowment Conference had been a triumph. 12 cities now wanted to replicate her model. She rounded a corner and stopped cold. A young Latina woman sat slumped against the wall, sweating, disoriented. People streamed past, absorbed in their phones and conversations. The woman's hand clutched her chest, her breathing shallow. Sarah checked her watch. The meeting started in 5 minutes. Major foundation directors were waiting. This could secure funding for national expansion. The woman's glazed eyes found Sarah's, a whispered plea. "Help me." Sarah dropped her briefcase and kneeled beside her. "I'm calling 911. Stay with me." Carmen found her 20 minutes later, sitting with the woman as paramedics loaded her into an ambulance. "Sarah, the meeting." "I know." Carmen's expression shifted from frustration to understanding. "You stopped again." "I had to." "Some people are just built that way," Carmen smiled through tears. "That's why Eleanor chose you." Later that evening, Sarah visited Eleanor at Emerald Heights. Her old friend sat in the sunroom, staring at the water, lost in her own mind. But when Sarah took her hand, Eleanor turned. "You're the girl who stopped." "Yes." "Good. Keep stopping. That's how we change the world." Sarah squeezed her hand, understanding finally that she hadn't destroyed her future that day at Pike Place Market. She'd discovered it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.